Okay, good morning and welcome to Ag Talk and Raw, where I talk raw about agriculture and other things that are on my mind. Right now, what's on my mind is this coffee. Okay, so it's been a long few days, a lot of things going on, and I'm gonna kind of move this over here so I can get to the video at hand. There's no, weird. Anyway, I need to get to last on the 8th video. So I'm kind of yammering and stammering here because I'm pretty damn tired. Well, the first thing we're going to talk about, first thing I'm going to talk about is the
Good morning
8530. Okay, so the 8530, I had John Deere come out, and I'm going to talk about this on my other channel also. Just probably not today because I am probably not going to post. Well, if I post a video there today, it's not going to be what you're expecting. I do have one made. I've been so busy I haven't even had time to run the camera. So, anyway, let me get a couple more sips of this in. Alright. So, 8530. Had John Deere come out yesterday to diagnose the thing. They plugged the computer in, and lo and behold, it actually did hook up. Last time we went to hook up, it wouldn't hook up. So he went through the codes. There was like 5 codes that this thing had thrown. I had taken a photo of it, of the codes, and it really nothing too alarming. Really nothing too alarming. What the hell did it say? It had a lot to do with mismatch engine speed versus the hydro speed, because it has a hydrostatic pump, I guess, on it. Hydrostatic motor, hydrostatic pump. So it was mismatch speed, overspeed of the hydrostatic pump, overspeed of the engine. What else did it do? Yeah, so anyways, he checked the sensors where all these overspeeds and mismatches were supposed to be taking place, and lo and behold, they are reading. They're working. Now, sometimes with these things, they'll work, and then they, when it's cold, and then they won't work. But I don't know. I think, personally, I think that they're working. Now, I ran that thing for 6 or 7 days, and I haven't had a lick of trouble with it. There's a couple of little hiccups here and there. It seemed like it wasn't shifting correctly. So he decided that he would put the pressure tester on there at the hydro pump. Yeah, it's the hydro pump, whatever, where the oil pressure comes from. Yeah, in the hydro pump, where the pressure comes into the transmission. And excuse me, the pump was actually putting out. What are we doing here, thing? The pump was putting out about 100 pounds, 110, 120 pounds less than it was supposed to. It was a good 110 pounds below its minimum. So that led him to be quite concerned. So he goes to the computer. Computer says, check the solenoids, the O-rings on the solenoids. So he pulls the solenoids down, and O-rings seem okay. And then it says check screens, and there's 2 screens up in there. So he pulled the 2 screens out of there. There's screens all over this tractor, I swear. They were perfectly clean. And then deep inside, there's these 2 tubes. They're called jumper tubes. And they take a special tool to pull out. And he says, I don't have that special tool. He says, I don't even know how to get them out or anything. I had a bore scope. So he shot the bore scope in there. And he didn't notice anything in the bore scope. So, yeah. He says, it looks nice and tight in there from here. So he called over to one of the guys in the other shops, and he asked them if they had ever had any problems with that jumper tube. The guy says, no. He says, we've never had a jumper tube tear out an O-ring in there, so it's unlikely that. So he asked what tractor it was in. The guy, the Alex is his name. Alex asked the fellow that he was talking to what tractor, or the fellow that was talking to Alex on the phone, asked him what tractor it was, and it was the 8530. And he says, oh, that's weird. We don't generally have any trouble with the 8530s. He says usually the 7000 series, the smaller tractors that we have trouble with. But the 8000 series has been pretty well bulletproof. And with the hours that are on it, there's 4,500 hours on the tractor, so it really shouldn't be having any trouble. So he did say, he said, listen, he said, why don't you change out the solenoids? He says there could be something that got in the solenoids, because when I had that metal in there, I pulled that bottom screen, which there's no metal in the screens, so things are not coming apart, they are clean. So he pulls the solenoids down again, he looks at them, there's just nothing in them, but he says, well, stranger things have happened. He said the barrel could be, corroded inside, because they do run dry. There's no oil or anything in the barrels of those things where the solenoid valve pulls it. And there could be corrosion. He says weird things happen. He says things warp, from heat and other things. So he says, why don't you just do the cheap option and change those two solenoids out? So pretty much decided that that's what we were going to do. So I went home here to the computer and I got on the John Deere website where they have the full lineup of bits and pieces for the thing, the parts catalog, and I ordered two of those solenoids. So they should be here. They should be here this morning. I overnighted them. Very simple to replace those two solenoids, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than transmission. So hopefully everything clears up. Now he did run a calibration, a forced calibration, which reset all the defaults in the tractor. So, I mean, when I got in the tractor, I had stuff in my eyes. When I got in the tractor and went to back it up, I could tell right away that things were different from the last time I drove it the night before. And then, of course, when I went forward with the tractor, I had no speed, so I'm in a thumb dial there and make it go. And the thumb dial on those John Deere tractors is just unbelievable. I mean, you just one click and it's like a quarter of a mile an hour or less. It's ridiculously accurate in your speed. So if you want to dial a tenth of a mile an hour, you can do it. Man, something in my eye. So anyway, that's what's going on with the 8530. We were doing a fuel rail test, and the fuel rail, there's a chart or a graph. You can graph the fuel rail to see if the pressure goes up, and there's a valve, an overpressure valve that'll pop if it's too high. And his computer died just before we got to the point where we really needed to be. So I don't know. I'm not sure whether it's going to work, correctly or not. He said they do go bad. He said there's two of them. He said we usually replace the pressure valve and the poppet valve, the overpressure valve. When we do one, we do the other. So I don't know. I'm going to see if that problem persists, and that problem is pretty simple. It's just when you're going up a hill and that tractor's hot, from running all day, or up the temperature from running all day, and you get up a hill or something that's really taxing it, it'll beep. It'll give me an ECU code, which is basically that fuel rail line. Now, I don't know if it continues. I'm going to replace those two parts, and we should be pretty good to go. But yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was what's going on down in Washington D.C. and how it's affecting the country. I mean, it really doesn't have much to do with agriculture, but I have been watching TV a little bit on the news on this Struck and Lisa Page text messaging thing, and if you watch the news, it's no big deal. It's like, oh, it's just he made a couple of comments about the president, but or before he was a president, the candidate Donald Trump, and but when they put it into context where it's on a timeline, and that's what they did. And I watched Trey Gowdy because I think Trey Gowdy's an awesome guy. If anybody's going to get to the bottom of this mess, it's going to be Trey Gowdy. So, okay, so Trey Gowdy, he's grilling this Struck guy, and Struck is just, he's an obstructionist, man. I mean, if you watch that thing, he's like, I am not going to answer. He asked him how many interviews he had given in 11 days, the time that he was appointed to this position to the time that he said that he had sent that text message to Lisa Page about the impeachment. And he says, I've been instructed not to answer that question. It's an ongoing investigation. Well, an ongoing investigation, I could see if he had asked him, what are the names of the people that you interviewed in that time period? And, but he didn't. He just asked for a number. It could have been one, could have been none, could have been 100. And they go into this crazy, of course the Democrats just don't want him to be interviewed the way he needs to be interviewed. If you don't know, if you're watching this and you don't know, the FBI is supposed to be neutral. It's neutral, Democrat, Republican, and then in the middle is the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They're not supposed to have a political affiliation. Now, when they do these investigations anyway, they have to go in with an open mind, unbiased open mind, looking for either innocence or guilt. You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty here in this country. Well, Mr. Strzok was writing these emails or these text messages, possibly emails, on government property, i.e. the phones and the computers or whatnot, and for so-called personal text messages. Well, that's an abuse of it. Not that it matters. If this was his lover, like everybody has said, it would be, oh, Lisa, I love you so much. I can't wait to get you home at night. Shit like that. But that's not what he was talking about. They were talking about stopping the presidency, stopping the president from becoming president, all this stuff. And later as I was watching this, it even goes into the Clinton email investigation and how they had to do it right, not to screw it up. They had to do this right. And if you read between the lines, which I'm pretty capable of reading between lines, I guess, and what they were talking, or what he was talking about, and what everybody is not assumed but understood that he was talking about, was we have to do the Clinton investigation right. So when we do the Russia-Trump investigation, and they really go deep into that, because he had headed up the Russia probe, and it just kind of sucks, because they already had a letter. Comey already had a letter drafted to exonerate Hillary Clinton. She had not sufficient evidence of wrongdoing before they were even finished with the investigation. And Donald Trump, they had him before he was even president. They were talking about impeachment, or basically collusion. Which collusion is not a word that it's not illegal. Collusion is not illegal. Treason is. And conspiring to commit, conspiring, and that's what collusion takes the place of. It's all in the wording. If you make up a word or use a word that isn't written in the law dictionaries as an illegal act, like collusion, if they would have used treason or collaboration or whatever. I think it was collaboration. You collaborate with the enemy, and that becomes treason, which they're calling it collusion, so that really it's not illegal. So anyway, it's just so, these lawyers, and they're all lawyers, and that's the really scary part about this. And it's scary and it's not scary. You need someone that knows the law in order to uphold the law. So you got to have a lawyer. But when you have corruption or bias, like we have with this FBI agent Strzok, that's dangerous. That's really, really dangerous. And it's the same thing with Hillary Clinton. She's a lawyer, and they set precedents. Now, I'm not a lawyer, believe me, I'm not. I have used lawyers to defend myself and other things. But the thing with Hillary Clinton is they let her off the hook for what she had done. And that is illegal. It is in the doctrine. It is not doctrines, but it's in the law books. You can't have personal. Why is that door open? No. Oh, I see why that door is open, because I'm looking at a different screen. Anyway, it's illegal what she did. The emails, the destruction of evidence, which she knowingly did in an ongoing investigation, should have landed her and her colleagues in jail, but it didn't. So by allowing Hillary Clinton, that slippery snotbag, off the hook, and yes, I'm biased. I don't like Hillary Clinton. I think Hillary Clinton has done some atrocious things. Sold out our country. Well, there's your treason. Uranium. The Iran deal, that money deal, giving Iran millions of dollars to prevent them from getting nuclear weapons. Well, when you give somebody a pot of money and it takes a pot of money to make nuclear weapons, what in the hell do you think they're going to do with that money? But that was her and Obama. The Benghazi thing, it's a known fact that she knew that there were SEALs like 8 minutes away that could have got those men out. There was information that those men had that they didn't want out, and that's my conspiracy theory on the whole thing. So they let her off the hook, and that sets precedence. So the next person that does these things can stand before a court and say, well, I did nothing different than what Hillary Clinton did, and she got away with it. So if she got away with it, that sets precedence. I also should be allowed to get away with it. So they really do need to go back and get her. They really do. They need to get her. But Trey Gowdy was talking about this, and she is the witness that she is the star witness, because she is the one that did these things. But they're talking about it being too late because she's had too much time to get her story, implanted in her brain. And she's such an arrogant bitch. The last time I saw her in front of Congress, it was, how dare you interview me? How dare you? That kind of a thing. And, what the heck was it? It was a Tom Cruise movie, and I forget what the name of the movie was, where the general who had ordered these men killed at Guantanamo Bay or whatever. That's the arrogance that she has, that type of arrogance that she can't be touched. And she did it for the good of the country, which, in all honesty, she did it for the good of her pockets. I mean, how much money can one person have, or need to be happy? I mean, I guess he who holds all the money holds all the rules, and how do you go from being bankrupt in 2007, 6 or 7, to being $300-some million in your bank account? I wish I could do that shit. You don't do that legally. You don't do that without corruption of some sort. So, me and corruption don't get along too well, I guess. But, and here's another one, food for thought. If Donald Trump had something to do with the Russians and getting him elected, then fine. He needs to be brought up on charges just like anybody else. I'm not saying that, so what, if he gets caught doing this, which I don't believe he did. I do believe there were members of his team that were talking to the Russians. Why? I have no idea. But I do also know that when you are a candidate, you have certain freedoms to talk to certain leaders from around the world, because there is a huge possibility, a 50-50 possibility, that you are going to become the president of the United States. And it's just a good thing to become, friendly. Like, hey, by the way, I'm the candidate. My name is so-and-so, and I'd like to speak with, your supreme leader, or your chairman, as they call Kim Jong-un now, the chairman. You have that sort of thing that is legal, and I know that a lot of that did take place in countries around the world, and including Russia and maybe some others. I don't know. I wasn't there, but there's certain things you have to do, and when you watch the mainstream news, it's the worst thing in the world. Because Donald Trump did this. Said Donald Trump's advisor did this. Was Donald Trump on the phone saying, "Hey, Vladdy"? I'll have to wait until after the election so that we can get more in depth. I'll have a little more freedom. Do you remember that conversation? Yeah, that was Barack Obama. Now, why in the hell wasn't he brought up on charges of collusion or conspiracy? I mean, that's conspiracy, I would think. Not conspiracy. What the heck? Collaboration. A collaboration. So the president's caught on the microphone talking to one of Vladimir Putin's, guys, top aides or whatever you call them, about wait until after the election so that he would have more freedom to discuss the situation. I mean, if it was a clean conversation, one that didn't impact the United States in a negative way or line your pockets in a positive way, why was it such a big deal that you had to wait until after the election in order to have this talk? So, I mean, this corruption the last 8 years, it's actually been the last 30 years, is ridiculous, and it really does need to stop. And this, if it's bled over into the FBI, which is supposed to be non-biased, then you got to deal with it there. And I've never really understood the way the whole thing works, and I still don't. I just get the gist of it, and I do know that the FBI, they're to uphold the Constitution of the United States, just like the President and everybody else that takes that oath to uphold the Constitution and the United States of the United States of America, to protect its people. Selling out your country's uranium supply to the Russians is not protecting your people. It's actually giving your enemies the ability to fucking nuke you. I mean, there you go. It's that simple. That in itself is a treasonous act. But of course, they're not going to take care of that. So now we get on to farming stuff. If you're still here, we have tariffs now that are going into effect against China, and as you know, the president is in the European Union, and they're all having a fit about Theresa May. Oh my God, he disrespected the Queen. Well, let's put it this way. If he disrespected the Queen, I highly doubt that he did it on purpose. And when you go to another country and you meet their leaders or their political figures, I mean, the Queen has nothing to do with the country's political, spectrum anymore. It's all done through Parliament, and they do have, what do they call him, Prime Minister. Okay, so you got a Prime Minister in England. The Queen of England is strictly an honorary position. She's royalty from millions of years ago when they had, well, not millions of years ago, but before they had Parliament and all that stuff that actually took control of the country when they, but she's left over from that. Now, I know that the English people love the Queen, and they love the royal family, which they should, because it's part of their history, it's part of their history, and that's what they like to do. So if Donald Trump went over to the Queen and shook her hand, that's the American thing to do. Maybe his handlers, or his aides weren't too versed in saying, okay, Mr. Trump, you need to bow before the Queen as you take her hand, and Miss Melania Trump, you need to curtsy to the Queen before you take her hand. Now, okay, maybe that didn't happen, but I watched the debates years ago, back in 2016 when they ignored Ben Carson and Donald Trump is up to go on stage next, and he paused and said, yeah. So, and he got Ben Carson up on the stage, which all the other candidates for the nomination to run as the president of the United States, for the presidency of the United States, they just walked right past Ben Carson. But Donald took the time to, and honestly, that gained a lot of respect for me, because you have to treat people well in order to be liked, and it wasn't fake, and all the other candidates, they were like, what are you still doing here? And then they go up on the stage, made them look like assholes. Then, Donald Trump stopped and said, hey, Ben, go, you're ahead of me, go. What are you doing here? I mean, it was what he was supposed to do, and it was just natural, and it was the way he was. So I was reading last night, and I do a lot of reading, and I do a lot of reading, believe it or not, and I'm reading the articles on, the president's trips to England, because I landed in England the day after the election, and there was in the city in London, or at Heathrow, we were not confronted, but the immigration officer, she was like, are you going to go back to the United States? With this really disgusted look on her face. I was like, yeah, why wouldn't we? And she goes, well, Trump's won. And I was like, yes! Because I am so sick and tired, like most Americans obviously are sick and tired, true Americans, not these fake ones that move into the country like a few years ago and climb up on the base of the Statue of Liberty and disrespect our country, even though they are an immigrant. a naturalized citizen. I honestly think they should take her naturalization away or send her into an education program on how and what this country was founded on and what it's about. Or just send her ass back to whatever shithole country she came from, because that's where she needs to go. It was a really shitty country too, from what I understand. It's just nothing but civil war all the time, and she's here bitching about our country. What the hell is wrong with this woman? A mental institution, at least. But yeah, so when you go into a country where in the cities they are programmed to hate a certain candidate or programmed to hate a certain person with such aggression that they would ask me, a traveler into their country, if I was going to go back. Well, of course I'm going to go back. I'm here to visit your country and take in the sights and buy a couple of John Deere tractors, and then I'm going home. Home is where your heart is. Home is where your home is home. There's a lot of people that don't feel that the United States is their home. They're called expats. I am not one of those. So I love it here. It's home. I don't like some of the laws and rules that I have to follow because they strip away my freedoms. But for the most part, I love the United States. I think that I should be allowed to carry a firearm to protect myself, and it shouldn't be infringed. What's so wrong about me carrying a firearm? If someone's coming to kill me, hurt me, which I am actually, I'm not in fear of it, but it's at the back of my mind. When I put myself out here on the internet and I have these views and stuff, I do get death threats. I do get death threats. So if I got a death threat, why shouldn't I be able to strap on a piece of iron with lead in it and powder and defend myself in the case that it does, arise? It is my constitutional right. These shitty little laws that the state has put in there that if you even get caught with a firearm, with a round in the chamber, it's 10 years in jail. So I'm a law-abiding citizen, so I don't think that I should have that right stripped away from me. Now, if you're a dirty little thug thief and you get caught doing thug thief shit, yeah, you shouldn't have the right to have a gun on you. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have the right to own one, but you shouldn't have the right to have one on you. And then you can put you in jail, but don't make a person that follows all the rules a criminal before, just so that you can fine them or throw them in jail. We've got enough people in jail already. So, yeah, but anyways, with these tariffs and stuff that are on the steel and aluminum, we are in the United States. We have steel and aluminum. We can make our own steel and aluminum. Steel and aluminum factories or foundries and refineries or steel mills, I guess they call them mills, they're all shut, not all of them, but they're shut down. Why are they shut down? Well, a lot of it's due to arrogance of the owners of these steel mills. They wanted to line their pockets, and foolishness and corruption within the companies that had these steel mills. But, they did wise up at the end. Like, hey, wait a minute, Japan at that time, Japan and European countries like Germany that had been bombed out after World War II, during World War II, they rebuilt their steel industry pretty rapidly. And Japan and Germany and France and anybody that produces steel over there, they built brand new facilities that were more efficient, faster, and cleaner or whatnot, and more, the efficiency is the most important part. Whereas here in the United States, even though the quality of our steel was top quality, number one, people were able to buy steel from other countries cheaper, and it was a lesser quality, but it was cheaper, and they could get away with it. So that's what started to happen. And the unions, between the unions and the owners of these companies, that's what really killed the steel industry. But we need to rebuild that, because let's face it, what would happen if there was a war, there was an invasion? What are we going to do? We're going to call up a country that produces steel to bring us steel or to build our tanks and our weapons for us? It's crazy. We need to have a strong infrastructure. Our infrastructure was gutted out by the last 4 or 5 administrations. Well, let's see. We got Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama. So, yeah, 4. Reagan was really into, a strong infrastructure and a strong military, and, that's what he was into. And that's, deservingly right. You have to. You just have to. You have to have a strong infrastructure. If you cannot produce what you need in time of need, you are a failing nation. So I'm hoping to see some steel mills come back in, or ramp up production, or add on and build infrastructure so that we can produce our own steel. I mean, we had how many steel mills within 50 miles of us? We had Fairless Steel. We used to get ammonium sulfate out of Fairless Steel. Bethlehem Steel, we used to get ammonium sulfate out of there. You have U.S. Steel, and I don't think we ever got anything out of U.S. Steel. And you had, obviously, Pittsburgh Steel. So you had all these steel mills right here. Pittsburgh was out farther, but not really as far as you'd think. But, you had all these steel mills, and now I don't even think U.S. Steel is anywhere near me. I wouldn't even know where the U.S. Steel plant is. I think there was a U.S. Steel in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which isn't far. I know there was the Fairless Steel, which wasn't far either. That was in New Jersey, I think Fairless was. Fairless Hills, Fairless, New Jersey. Fairless Hills, New Jersey, and Fairless. So they're gone. They're gone. So what are you going to do? If there is an attack, what are we going to do? Call up Canada, who's, got a freaking communist leader right now who wants to, not communist, but you know what I mean. He's just a liberal leader that wants to, really use the countries to feed the cities. And same thing here in the United States. I mean, and it's kind of always been that way, but the cities matter, the countries don't, until this past election when the country voted in the Donald Trump, the cities all cried. Well, just think about next time you go into a city, look around you and tell me how many actual Americans are around you when you're in those cities. I've been to New York, I've been to Philadelphia. Philadelphia's got a lot more Americans in it than say New York does. But New York City is nothing. It's a city of immigrants, and there's nothing wrong with immigration if it's legal. But they're clueless assholes, So now these tariffs. We'll get back to tariffs because I know I've wandered off track. Of course, first thing that these other countries do is they cancel orders for grain. Soybeans, corn, big one, wheat. We'll buy our wheat and corn and soybeans from somewhere else. Well, that's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. But 90% of people think that, oh my God, they're just not going to buy our grain. That's bullshit. They're going to buy your grain. There's only a very small carryover. Last I heard, 3 to 6 days. 3 to 6 days of carryover left, at the end of the fiscal year. So, at harvest. So, by the time they start harvesting, in the heartland, the center of the country, where the breadbasket of the world is, there's like 3 to 6 days of carryover left. So, if there was like a major disaster in the middle of the country and they couldn't get back on those fields within those 3 to 6 days, the grain bins are empty, man. They're just empty. And there's no food to feed animals. And then, of course, that impacts the chicken and pork and beef industry. You won't have eggs. And people start to get a little concerned because the price of beef goes from $4.90 a pound to $7.80 a pound. And then the next week it goes to $20.45 a pound. It just keeps climbing up because there really isn't the grain out there to just say, okay, so United States farmers, fuck you, you can go to hell, and we're going to buy it from Brazil. Brazil doesn't have it. Nobody has it. It's just not there. They can't at the Chicago Board of Trade say, okay, we're short on grain, let's produce. They don't produce anything. They buy and sell. Let's they can't. It just isn't there. And So where's this grain going to come from? It's going to come from here. They're going to buy your grain. The one that's going to make the money is the middleman then, though, because, Russia or China or Japan or whoever is pissed off at us at the moment, they're going to say, we're not going to buy your corn and soybeans, but they're going to call Brazil. Brazil's going to say, well, okay, we can fill that order. And then they hang up the phone. And then they pick up the phone and say, hey, United States broker, we need 300 million bushels of corn to go to China. Is that a possibility? Yeah, we can do it. Got it. It's here. Okay. Well, this is what I'm going to pay you. And that's just the way it goes, because the middleman's got to get his money. The middleman's got to get his money. And who bears the burden of the middleman? Hi. It's us. It's the farmer, the American farmer, because the middleman certainly isn't going to take a pay cut. CBOT's not going to bump the pricing to it just isn't going to happen. They're going to buy the grain. Yeah, we're going to get less money for it, maybe. I got a pretty good idea that the president's on it. There was an announcement about 5 days ago. The president said, I'm going to take care of my farmers. He does not want the farmers to suffer any more than we already have. Now, when I say farmers suffering, I'm not talking about, Buffett. I'm not talking about Poet. I'm not talking about these huge companies that have bought up huge blocks of land out in the middle of the country because, they don't have to make money farming. It's a write-off to them. Brand new tractors every year, brand new combines and all this stuff. I'm talking about guys, family farms, farmers, not corporate farms, farmers, actual farmers. Those are the men and women that need, and young men and women, old men and women that need to have some stability in the pricing to produce a food supply that is of good quality to feed the world. And I think that this president is looking at the whole picture, not just like the last four or five presidents, because 4 or 5 presidents. He's looking at the whole picture. He's like, okay, here's the whole thing. Here's our country. It's a big round circle, and this is this, and this is our farmers. This tiny little sliver in here, that 1.9%, that's the farmer. And, they need to be taken care of because that little sliver of 1.9% make this whole thing possible. Yep, this whole thing is possible because of that 1.9%, which 98.1% of people don't understand that. They don't understand that. They don't realize that without men and women like me and you, there is no country. There is no board of trade. There is none of that stuff. It's all done. So I think he's looking at the whole picture. I've been talking for 37 minutes and 35 seconds, and I think that's long enough. You're probably just going to have to listen to this. There's no sense watching it because it's just me sitting in a chair here in my Indiana Jones hat. Yep. So, anyway, thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out One Lonely Farmer if you don't know who that is. That's me on my other channel, and it's a very different channel from this one. So, thank you.